Many people would sooner die than think. In fact, they do so. Bertrand Russell.
Edgar Mitchell, former astronaut who walked on the moon in 1971 during Apollo 14, has since become a major public advocate in the growing worldwide UFO movement. He speaks at UFO conventions all over the world. In a 1998 London Times news article, Mitchell is described as believing that aliens have landed on the Earth, and he has intensified his campaign to persuade Washington to acknowledge life beyond our skies. Mitchell argues that life is almost certain to exist on any other planet with a supportive environment. Some physicists, he points out, now believe it is possible to actually travel faster than the speed of light. He is 90% certain that many of the thousands of UFOs recorded since the 1940s belong to visitors from another planet. Although some have been delusions and others natural phenomena, too many remain unexplained, he said. This suggests there are humanoids manning craft which have characteristics not in the arsenal of any nation on Earth that we know of. This is very alarming, he said. Edgar Mitchell holds a PhD from MIT and stands to be a perfect candidate in this particular NASA UFO investigation. Mitchell says his research, including conversations with people who have worked in intelligence agencies and military groups, have convinced him that the American government has covered up the truth about UFOs for 50 years. I thought if I sent Edgar Mitchell the tether footage from STS-75 that he could clearly see that we were looking at the largest UFOs ever captured on film. I wrote Apollo 14 astronaut Dr. Edgar Mitchell in October of 1999. On November 24, 1999, Edgar Mitchell wrote me the following letter. David Sarita, yes, I have received your film and reviewed it and the info package you provided. I see utterly nothing about the tether incident that is particularly interesting. If there is more revealing footage, then I will look at it. However, I have looked at many feet of space film and have yet to see only one that has anything worth looking into regarding UFO appearances. Signed, Edgar Mitchell. I cannot accept the idea that such a great proponent of UFOs was so adamantly against the suggestion that these giant circles passing behind the tethered satellite were UFOs. He was shrugging off the most astounding piece of video ever witnessed of UFOs in the history of the space program. I couldn't believe it. Dr. Mitchell, who was an MIT PhD, could not even acknowledge that the discs were clearly going behind the 12-mile length of the tether. He couldn't even see that very simple fact. I think just about any moron can tell the difference between when a disc is going behind this piece of wood and when it's going in front of it. That's in front, that is behind. This is not in front, this is behind. And that's exactly how they appear. Why couldn't Edgar Mitchell see this point? I decided to try to argue the points with Mitchell more precisely. He wrote me back almost immediately. David, at first glance they are just particles, perhaps outgassed. I do not know. But I certainly would look for a more prosaic explanation than UFOs. If you have a better film, I will look at it, but I am not very optimistic that they are anything exotic. Signed, Edgar Mitchell. Edgar Mitchell wrote to me that he thought the objects were just particles, perhaps outgassed from the space shuttle. How does a particle appear to be visible from over 77 miles away? We're looking, the cameras on the space shuttle are at least 77 miles away and drifting past 100 miles. How do you see just little particles of dust floating by that appear as perfect giant circles with notches cut out of the side, clearly passing behind the tether, pulsing with very sophisticated wave patterns? How do particles behave like this? Maybe I have to relearn and reinvestigate particle theory to understand some of these ideas, these ridiculous ideas that some of these scientists are coming up with. He wrote me back the following letter on December 3rd, 1999. David Sarita, I remain open-minded, but I saw nothing on the tape you sent that had sharply defined edges in the vicinity of or passing behind the tether. Also in the footage of the tether, the commentator on the spacecraft is making a running commentary, where really anything of significance in space around the tether at that time, don't you think they would have been saying something about it? If they were as big as you say, they would have been visible to the naked eye and surely reported, not ignored as seems to be the case. You comment about no infrared images. Of course not. If nothing is there, how could there be an infrared image? Signed, Edgar Mitchell. The first point that Dr. Mitchell makes here is that I saw nothing on the tape that had sharply defined edges in the vicinity of or passing behind the tether, reveals that he is ignoring just how defined the edges of these huge discs are and how sharply defined they are as they travel behind the very clear edges of the tether. More precisely about the tether, we remember the Huntsville, Alabama NASA operator asking the crew,
"And how wide does that tether appear to be? It seems to resemble a much wider strand than we'd expect. Can you describe which way the satellite is visible on that strand?"
The 12-mile-long tether cable was only 1/10 of a centimeter in thickness and should not have been visible from over 77 miles away. There was no answer to why it appeared so thick because the shuttle astronauts did not know the answer then. But on Wednesday, February 28, 1996, of the NASA STS-75 Day 7 highlights, they recorded the very reasons as the scientists report that they can measure sunlight-induced electrical charge on the tether and satellite as it moves through the daylight and night portions of its orbit around the Earth. Because the tether was charged with energy constantly by the highly charged particles in space and from the ionosphere, it produced a magnetic field around it which became sunlit and very visible. But also the report revealed that nitrogen gas from the satellite had been emptied and the gas would have become ionized, which could have produced a neon tube-like effect. This all explained precisely why the tether appeared so thick from so far away. It had nothing to do with the glare or out-of-focus theories.
Claude is trying to do a quick, good job here adjusting the cameras.
Copy that.
Satellite now 100 nautical miles.
Charlie, completely unzoomed, and you see the full extent of the tether. I tried to adjust the focus, but I can't get better than that.
Okay, Claude. Thank you.
I'm going to zoom in now.
So precisely, the UFOs can be seen passing behind the thickness of the tether's sunlight-induced electrical charge and ionized gas. The light shining off of the tether and the energized field obscures the light shining from the UFOs precisely because the UFOs are passing behind the tethered satellite. These are all facts that Dr. Mitchell was unaware of.
This view showing the satellite.
Dr. Mitchell was obviously not considering the NASA astronauts talking about the UFOs on alternate Department of Defense encrypted radio channels, probably because they did not have them during his own Apollo 14 mission to the moon. During long pauses between words, we might assume that the astronauts and NASA control operators are talking on Department of Defense secure channels encrypted to prevent anyone from tapping into their conversations about classified information, such as unidentified flying objects.